Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of our interview shows. We've got a very, very special guest here today, blues guitarist and vocalist extraordinaire from Provog Records, Mr. Walter Trout. Walter, thanks for coming on the show. Very, very happy to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me, Peter. Glad to be here. Glad to be anywhere these days.
You've been a busy guy. So Walter's got this brand new album out on, like I said, Provog Records, which is a division of Mascot. Ordinary Madness, that's the brand new CD right here. And quite frankly, you've had a lot going on in your life the last decade or so. And we'll talk about a lot of these things as we go on. But in the last 10 years, you've released what, nine records, I think. So despite all that's gone on in your life, I think the creative juices, would you say, are still flowing pretty well?
I think at age 69, not my
Yeah, I know. You got me by a year. I know.
I think I'm probably at my creative peak, man. I feel so, I'm like busting with creative energy. I'm sequestered, right? There's no gigs, but I'm still sitting here playing this thing probably 5 hours a day, trying to learn new techniques, and I'm writing songs, and I feel I'm creatively raging right now in my old age.
And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. And I think the fans love you for it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've had my own band for 31 years. I had 2 years off where I was incredibly sick, right? Where I was out of commission for 2 years. But so in those 31 years, I've done 29 albums. So it's been an album a year, except for the 2 years that I was, non-commissioned there.
And that's a pace I don't think many people can keep up, but you've been able to do it pretty.
It hadn't affected me. I'm just
So let's go back to 2014. So that was a rough period for you. So you had the liver transplant. So how difficult was that for you? And did that kind of change your perspective, not only on your personal life, but on your professional career as well?
Wow. Yeah, I'll go back a little bit. For 10 years before I got the transplant, I was having symptoms and I didn't know what was happening. I was having equilibrium problems. I had chronic fatigue. It was difficult to even get up and move, let alone do a gig. And I started getting incredible cramps in my body, where my whole body would feel like I'm having a Charlie horse, even in my fingers when
Wow.
I'd be trying to play. And I just chalked it up to, okay, Walter, you really hammered yourself in your youth. The all those years I was a sideman and I was playing with all those people and I was partying heavily. I figured I had just done a lot of damage. Well, it turned out I had a disease called hepatitis C, and it was frying my liver slowly, and I had cirrhosis. And the liver disease came on, and finally I couldn't play anymore. They hospitalized me, and in a period of about 3 to 4 months, I lost 120 pounds. I was put into the hospital in ICU, and I was in that bed for 8 months. I didn't have a bite of solid food for 6 months. I had a hose in my nose. I had brain damage. I didn't recognize my wife or my kids. I lost the ability to speak for a while because of the brain damage. And then really at the last moment, the doctors were telling my wife, he's not going to make it. But they found a liver match for me. And they gave me the transplant. And then the real work started, because I had to relearn how to talk. I had to relearn how to use my legs, because I had not used my legs in 8 months. I'd been in a bed on my back. And so they said, I came home and I started physical therapy, and I realized I did not know how to play the guitar anymore. It was gone from my memory. because of the brain damage. So I started over again and I taught myself from scratch. I sat and I practiced the guitar every day for 6 hours, maybe. And my days consisted of 3 hours a day of physical therapy, and the rest of the time I was sitting relearning the guitar from scratch. How do you play a G chord? How do you play a bar chord? How do you bend a string? All of it. And I did that for about a year, and the music came back. And that's when I started. Okay, I'm going to start get my band back together and go do gigs. But I wanted to try a gig and see what would happen. Most guys would go to the corner bar and get up and see what happens. I hadn't been on a stage in 2 years. Me, being the idiot that I am, I went to Royal Albert Hall in London. So no pressure there. Haven't been on a stage in 2 years, but I have to say, I walked out on that stage. I was very, very apprehensive and I was very worried. Like, am I going to cramp up? If I try to sing, is anything going to come out? Am I going to have an equilibrium attack and fall over? All the stuff that was happening to me before. But I counted to four. That band came in behind me and it was a revelation. It was cathartic because I had this realization. Walter, you've done this 10,000 times. This is where you have lived your life, is on stage with a guitar in your hand. And the people are there, they're sitting there and they want to hear what you have to give them. And it was one of the biggest experiences of my life. But so then I was back, but as far as changing my perspective, that is so profound and deep, it's hard to even explain. Life is a whole different thing to me. I was just sitting talking with my wife about it, how your whole view of what's important in life gets turned around, twisted around. Your whole view of priorities, your whole view of the people you love, you realize what is really special and important and what makes life worth living. Before that transplant and before I got ill, I could get eaten up inside worrying about why is this guy selling more records. I mean, I was ambitious and I was driven and I was obsessed climbing that ladder. And now I don't give a shit. What I care about is my wife and my children and the fact that I have a career. I can support them by playing the guitar, which is all I ever wanted to do. Right now, there's no gigs, of course, but I have a career. I have a record deal. I have a record label that believes in me and supports me and is behind me. I have a beautiful wife of 30 years who I'm deeply in love with. I have three of the most amazing, talented, brilliant sons. And I have a great band who we're like a family, my band. And that's what's important. Everything else, it just doesn't matter. You know, it will change your perspective deeply, almost inexplicable. What's the word? Inexplicable, the depth of how your view of things will change when you face death every day for a couple of years. And why I'm here, I still don't know. In that liver ward, there were guys dying all around me every day. They were carrying them out. And somehow I'm one of the lucky ones.
I mean, that's that's an incredible story, and most people wouldn't still be here. I mean, there's something about Walter Trout that helped you persevere through all this. I mean, like 9 out of 10 folks would not have made it through that ordeal, and the
I,
fact that you're back. I mean, brain damage and all everything. Having to relearn how to talk and to eat and to play guitar. I mean, that's a monumental task for any normal person, I would think.
well, I do have to give a lot of credit here to my dear wife, because there were days in that hospital. I mean, when you're laying in a bed for 8 months and every day are they going to find a liver today?
Yeah.
They don't. Next day, are they going to find a liver today? And they don't. And that goes on for a month after month. The uncertainty and them saying, we don't know if he's going to make it through the night. And then you make it through the night. That people have asked me, well, were you thinking about music in the hospital? And I'm like, no, I was thinking about getting through the next 10 minutes without dying.
Yeah.
And so I have to say, there were times in there, Peter, that I lost hope and I gave up. And I said, my dear, I'm not going to make it. I'm tired of fighting. I can't fight. And she would say, no, you fight. You fight for me. You fight for our kids. You fight for those people that love your music. And you do not give up, whatever you do.
Yeah.
She basically kind of slapped me around like, hey, dude, no, you're not giving up. I'm not letting you give up. So a lot of the credit goes to having her in my corner.
Well, I think as human beings, we are pretty fragile creatures, and you almost someone going through something like that has to have someone on their side who's pushing them and driving them to want to live another day and get through the night, like you said, because that's it's a common thing to say. Well, we take things one day at a time, right? I think in your case, you're almost like taking it 1 minute at a time, right? At that during
Yeah,
the
that was it.
yeah.
It was literally, I mean, I've done a lot of interviews about this, and a lot of people have said, well, when you're in the hospital, didn't you like kind of write a song about what you were going through? And I went, I I wasn't even able to speak. A lot of the time, if my kid came to visit me, I didn't know who he was. It was a matter of literally making it through the next minute and minute by minute. And then here comes nighttime, and then you try to make it through to the morning, and then you start over again. I know a lot of people who have been through, um, deep diseases and experiences like this. They can relate to what I'm saying. This is a common thing that people go through. I saw it all around me in that hospital. And I saw there was one guy who was in the next room who had had a transplant. But after you get the transplant, there's a lot of work you have to do. That's when they start making you learn how to walk again. They start making you get out of that bed. They start making you um, try to get back and try to develop your strength again. And he wouldn't do any of it, but he had no one in his corner. He was alone. And the nurses used to tell me, we can't get him to do anything, but he doesn't have somebody like your wife coming in, and he didn't make it, you know.
Yeah. Wow. Well, let's switch gears a little bit to the music.
Yeah.
What I find incredible. So I've been following your career for a while, and so and everything that you went through, which you just talked about, how does it feel to you? I mean, quite frankly, in listening to a lot of your albums over the years, I mean, you're singing and playing on Ordinary Madness, and not just this album. I mean, we're talking about Survivor Blues, We're All in This Together, Battle Scars. I mean, you are putting out, like we said earlier, you're putting out some of the best music of your career, and you sound confident and strong. I mean, how good does it feel for you as an artist that you went through this, life-changing ordeal where you almost lost your life, and now here you are? How does it feel to be like where you are right now and having critics and fans telling you that this is some of the best music of your career? And it sounds like you even feel that it's some of the best music of your career. I mean, how good does that feel that you've triumphed over this and you are where you are today?
Well, of course it feels great, but this is the thing. When you ask about perspective and change in perspective, I have found that since I came back from the brink and have started playing again and recording again, that music is a whole new thing to me. I have so much more to say and so much more to put into it. And I also realized when I started gigging again and was able to start playing again, um, I realized that in the past, I had done so many gigs going all the way back to 1969 when I started doing this, that I realized there were a lot of times I took it for granted. Getting up on stage and playing for somebody was just something I do. And I realized I was guilty of, in the past, many nights standing up there thinking, how much longer till I can go back to the hotel room and watch HBO, and taking it for granted. It really came easy to me from the time I picked up a guitar when I was 10. It came very easy to me. It just said, this is what you're supposed to do. And so it was nothing for me to get up and do a gig. It was just what I did. And I did take it for granted. And when I wrote songs, I didn't have as much to say. It's hard to explain, but since I came back and these albums you're talking about, the playing, the singing, the writing, I have so much more I want to say and so much more I want to put into it. And it also matters to me in a way that it never did before. And so I think that's what you're talking about is, yes, I think I'm making the best music of my career because I have so much more. Um, my music is about expressing an emotion and about wanting to communicate with people. That's what I'm concerned with at my own, output. And I have a lot more to put into it, man. And it just means so much now.
Yeah, and you've had some help to put together this great music. So you talked about your band who you've been with for so many years. Could you talk a little bit about the rest of the band and how you met them and how they came to be playing with Walter Trout?
Well, I've had a band for my own band for 31 years, and I've had members come and go. I started the band a long time ago, even before I had kind of a serious band of my own. I would come home from tours with Canned Heat or John Mayall or somebody, and there was a little bar at the beach in Huntington Beach, and I led the house band there. Whenever I was home, I was down at that bar playing with my buddies. And when I got a record deal, I called up those guys and they became the Walter Trout Band. They were on Life in the Jungle on my first couple albums. It was really the late, great Jimmy Trapp and I who started the band together. And he was my best friend and he was the bass player on, like, I don't know, my first 10 albums, something like that. And he passed on. He had a heart attack and passed on in 2005. The band I have now, let's get to it now instead of going through all those members. On the bass, I have Mr. Johnny Graparik, and he's been on. He joined after I came back from the abyss, and I wanted to put the band together, but I wanted some different players. My drummer, Michael Lazier, who's been with me for about 14 years now, I said to him, I want to get a different bass player. Mike said, well, I know a whole lot of bass players. So we set up a day of auditions at my house. And we had, I think, 9 bass players. Each one of them got, I think it was an hour, and we would jam for a half an hour. And then we would go into the living room and sit down and have a cup of coffee and talk for a half an hour. Then the next guy would show up. We did this all day. And there were some great players. But then in comes Johnny Graparik. He was the last guy. And we were playing in the garage for about 3 minutes. And my wife came running in the garage and she yelled, "That's the guy." And I went, yeah, 3 minutes. And I know that's the guy. And he's been with me ever since. He's on Battle Scars, which was the album I made when I came back. He's on all the albums I've done. We're all in this together. He's on Live in Amsterdam. He's on. I can't even remember. This is my 5th album since I've been back. But he played with He was with Slash for 12 years. If you look up Slash's Blues Ball or Slash's Snake Pit, Johnny was the guy. He also toured with Carole King. He's played with pretty much everybody. I know he's
Jumping
got
around.
Steve Winwood on his resume. He's played with pretty much everybody, and he is the greatest bass player I've ever worked with, and I've worked with some of the best. A great guy. There's two different keyboard players on this album. The one who was in my band, who's on the majority of the album, is Teddy Zigzag Andreatis. And Teddy also was with Slash for 12 years. He and Johnny played together in that band. He was also Carole King's musical director. So he also was the touring keyboardist with Guns N' Roses and Alice Cooper. So when I tell that to people, they go, oh, well, he's a heavy metal guy. I go, yeah, but he also played with B.B. King and Carole King. I mean, he can play anything, right? Mike Lazier, who's been with me for 14 years, I sort of stole him away from Edgar Winter. He was playing with Edgar Winter, and he's just a powerhouse. You can hear him on there. Listen to the groove on Wanna Dance. You know, the guy's a powerhouse, man. And he played with my band in the garage. We jammed, and I said, you know, how much work is Edgar giving you? And he said, oh, 15 weeks a year. And I said, I can give you 9 months a year. That's how much I tour. So I kind of stole them away. And it's the greatest band. I mean, maybe I'm prejudiced, but in the blues rock genre, you're not going to find a better band. You can hear it on that record. You know, we have a certain way we play together, and we have a certain chemistry and a communication mentally, the way we play together, that I've never had with any other group of guys. And before the pandemic, we were touring in March, and we were out there we were raging, man. This band live was tearing it up. And then in the middle of the tour, we had to cancel it and come home. But I can't wait to get back out there with these guys.
I mean, everybody I'm talking to is saying the same thing. It's, you know, not being able to play live for a serious, you know, musician is terrible. And everybody's just absolutely chomping at the bit. It's not just you guys. It's felt everywhere, and for the fans too, because we want to go out and experience what you bring to the table, and it's hard for us as well. So
Yeah, I know. I have a friend who was talking to a musical icon who I will not name. I'll tell you in private. A musical icon, a legendary musician, and this guy told my friend, live music is over. It's not going to come back. And I don't believe that. All those people that go to festivals and clubs and gigs, you know, when I played the New Orleans Jazz Fest and opened for Aerosmith, there were 80,000 people. All of those people are not suddenly going to want to just sit at home when this pandemic is over. They want to go out. Part of the whole thing with live music is the bonding of being out in that crowd with somebody who's having the same experience, right? It becomes a community. And when those people are at a show, it doesn't matter if they're black or white or pink or green or left or right. None of that matters. Everyone is bonding in the enjoyment of that experience of listening to this music. And it's a beautiful thing, that community that is created every night at a show. That is one of the beautiful experiences you can have in life. And people want that, and it will be back. I'm very optimistic.
yeah, I mean, it just doesn't go away, and I think folks who have gone to live concerts throughout their lifetime, they know what we're talking about. They know that it's a void that's sitting there right now that can never be replaced. The only way to replace it is for things to get back to somewhat of a normalcy. Because yeah, you don't just stop, right? It's just, I mean, I look at myself. I've been going to see live music since I was like 14, 15 years old. I'm now in my mid 50s. So you just don't stop and say, you know what? If I never see another live show again, that's okay. It's not okay, right?
No, it's not okay.
No.
And I agree.
So, excuse me. So I want to talk a little bit more about the album. So a lot of great guitar tones on this album and a lot of really cool licks and riffs and solos. I mean, you know, the title track, I really love the slower, more moodier pieces on the album. Title track, All Out of Tears, Heaven is in Your Mind, Up Above, My Sky. Um, I hear some, it's obviously the whole thing sounds like Walter Trout, and I think you have a very distinctive style. I hear a little bit of Robin Trower and Steve Ray Vaughan in a couple songs. Can you talk a little bit about the approach to, you know, coming up with the riffs and the licks and solos, maybe the type of equipment you used on the album? 'Cause I think it's a great sounding album. Your vocals sound awesome, and the guitar work just sounds really, really crisp. And there's a lot of different textures and moods and tones throughout the album. So kind of what did you use? Obviously, you're mainly a Strat guy. So what kind of stuff did you use for this album?
Well, I can tell you that the solo work, now I'll go through the rhythm work and then the solo work, and all the solos are done on my stage rig, which is a Mesa Boogie Mark series amplifier played through a 4x12 cabinet, which has two Celestians on the top and two EVs on the bottom. And part of the sound that you're hearing also is I've done now 14 albums with producer Eric Korn, and he's just the best at getting sounds. He's the best at getting the most out of musicians. He's the best at helping you dial your songs in and get them concise and get them moving. You know, he's just great at it. But I can tell you, I've been endorsed by the Mesa Boogie Amplifier Company for 35 years. And I every time they put out a new Mark series, they send me one, and I use it. And they're up to a Mark V, and that's what I've been touring with. And on on We're All in This Together, I'm using the Mark V, and on Survivor Blues, I'm using the Mark V. Well, I was riding in the car one day with my son, Michael, who is a brilliant musician. And he said, Dad, I want to play you something. And he played me a song of mine. He said, what amp are you using on there? And I said, well, what year did we make it? You know, and he told me, and I said, oh, it's probably, if it was that year, it was probably a Mark IV. And he goes, well, with all due respect, Father, I like that sound better than I like the Mark V. And he said, I just think it, for what you do it. And I went, oh, wait a minute. So we went to the garage, we set them both up. We did an A-B back and forth. And I went, you know what, Mike, I think you have a point there. I called up Boogie and I said, look, on my next tour, I'm going to go back to using a Mark IV, and I want a spare. I want to have a spare with me. And they go, well, we don't make them anymore. And their main technical guy there, who's been there for like 40 years or something, his name is Mike Bendinelli. He called and he said, look, man, I'm going to build you a custom Mark IV. And he hand built a custom Mark IV. He went through and he found all the old parts that they used on the Mark IVs. And it's just spectacular amp. And that's what you're hearing on all the solos on this record. Now, some of them I might turn the gain up more. On One a Dance, I had the gain and the drive cranked. On All Out of Tears, it's the same amp, but I turned the gain down. I wanted it to be a little more clean, a little cleaner sound, right? But all the solos are that amp. The rhythms now, that was kind of fun because we did a lot of experimenting. I record in Robbie Krieger's studio, the guy from The Doors, right? He's a friend of mine. He's got a private studio, and it's spectacular, and it's full of vintage stuff. For instance, OK Boomer. we're going to do it. And I said to the man who runs the studio for Robbie, his name is Michael Dumas. And I said, hey, Michael, I don't know. I think this song might need, I could actually hear it with some humbuckers, instead of my Strat. And he comes walking in with an old SG and he says, here's Robbie's SG from the Doors. Why don't you try that? Um, like, yeah, okay. On Heartland, I said to him, this song is kind of Americana. And even though I'm a Strat guy, I think for the arpeggio rhythm track, there's arpeggios behind the vocal. I said, I bet you a Telly would sound cool. He came walking in with a Paisley Telly and he said, here's one of James Burton's guitars. He gave it to Robbie. So I'm using James Burton's Telly on Heartland and Robbie Krieger's Doors guitar on one of the songs. And then I'm like, well, I'd like to have an acoustic guitar strumming on My Foolish Pride. He comes walking in with his custom made Gibson and he goes, here, this is Dwight Yoakam's guitar. And he gave it to Robbie because he wanted a newer guitar. All this beautiful stuff that's there. And on Heartland, that James Burton's guitar, I'm like, well, if we're going to use James Burton's Telly, I'm going to have to play this through a Fender amp. And then they bring in this like 1956 Bassman, it's just really fun to record there. So on My Foolish Pride, originally the rhythm track, I did it on a Strat and I had it kind of crunchy. We were like, we'll make this sound kind of like Stonesy, Keith and Ronnie with the kind of crunchy. And I kept listening to it and I take it home and I go, this ain't it. And one day I listened to one of my favorite records of all time. And it was a song by Judy Collins called First Boy I Loved. And she has Stephen Stills playing behind her. And it's one of the most beautiful, sympathetic, accompanying guitars I've ever heard in my life. You give it a listen sometime.
Well,
but it's this beautiful, clean, ringing, and you can tell he's playing a Gretsch, like maybe a White Falcon or a Chet Atkins, and he's playing it very clean through an amp, and he's playing the chords and using the whammy bar. And I actually was talking, my guitar tech is a old friend of mine I've known for 40 years. He does all the work on my guitars. His name is Doc Patillo, and he's got quite a collection. And I was playing him the tracks, and I said, man, this song would sound so much better with that kind of Stephen Stills Gretsch thing. He comes walking out with like a 1964 Chet Atkins and says, here, go play this. So I played that through one of Robbie's old Gibson amps from the 50s.
wow.
And that's the rhythm track on My Foolish Pride. And so I had a lot of fun goofing with guitar sounds on this record.
Yeah, you had some of the best gear to use. I mean, that's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, it's limitless in Robbie's place. I mean, it's so much fun to be there. It's kind of become my second home, and I can't see making a record anywhere else. And then Robbie walks in once in a while. He walked in one day and he said, what are you doing? I said, I just played a solo on this song. The song's called Wanna Dance, right? And he stood there by the board and he said, well, play it for me. And we played him Wanna Dance. I had just done the solo. And at the end of the solo, he looked over at me and just busted into this big grin. And that was, I'm going to lose it here. I was like, Robbie Krieger just gave me the seal of approval, man.
Exactly. That's great. That's great. Yeah, you mentioned the OK Boomer song before. That's a lot of fun, and I think a lot of people, kind of like in our age group, would get a kick out of that. If anybody who's watching who hasn't heard it, go out and find somewhere you can listen to OK Boomer. I mean, there's a lot of great songs on the album, but that's like a lot of fun. It's at the back end of the album. So what was the kind of the inspiration for that track?
Well, I have three sons. They're all very very strong-willed kids, and once in a while, Mike, I'd say something that outraged him, and he'd kind of say, "Okay, Boomer," and he'd walk out. And then I was watching a TV show where this mother is having an argument with her daughter, and her daughter goes, "Okay, Boomer," and I'm thinking, yeah, yeah. What's the problem with being a boomer? And I asked my son Mike, I said, what is this thing with being a boomer? What's the problem? And he said to me, Dad, I love you, and with all due respect, look at what you're leaving for us. And I looked at him, and this was his quote: "The whole world is on fire, Dad, and you're leaving this to us to try and fix." And I got it. And so I told my wife again. She turns up here in conversation, but I said, I'm the guy who, when somebody says something derogatory, I take it and I own it. Somebody once sent me an email. I came to see you. You play too many notes and you're too loud. I said, I'm going to own it. So for years, I sold T-shirts that say "too many notes, too loud." I say that way they know what they get, right? So I go, I'm going to own "OK Boomer." I want to write a song called "OK Boomer," and my wife sat down, grabbed the pen, and she wrote the first verse. I was born in 51 in the shadow of the war. We learned how to duck and cover. We don't do that no more. I grew up in the 60s. I had my fun. I don't care what you say. I'm a boomer and I'm okay. And she handed it back to me, and I went, oh, that's it, baby. And
That's
I wrote the rest. But I figured I'm going to own it. And it's a little bit of an anthem for people of our generation there, Peter,
Yep. Yep. That's great. It's a fun song. It really is. It's a different song on the album, but I'm so happy it's there.
Well,
So
let me tell you about cutting it. We did not rehearse it. We sat in the control room. I said to the band, "This is what we're going to do." And I said, and I want it to sound, I said, "You guys remember when we were 15 and we would go into the garage with our friends and we would just jam, and it was chaotic and it was disorganized and loose, but we were having the time of our life, and it didn't even matter how we sounded. We were just making this noise together, and we were having the time of our lives. You remember that? That's what I want this song to sound like. That's why I don't want to rehearse it. I went out and I counted to four. I had told them how it's going to go, and what you hear, that's the first and last time we ever played it.
wow.
I wanted it loose. I wanted it. I said, I want it to be chaos, you know.
It's got this garage sound to it, right? Like a bunch of guys just kind of plugged in the garage and just said, "All right, here we go," and
That's what I wanted it to
very
be.
spontaneous.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Remember how it felt when you were 15 playing in the garage with your friends. That's what we want to create.
well, it worked. It worked. So you've I mean you've played with some legendary musicians in your career. You were Can Heat and John Mayall, John Lee Hooker, so many, legends of the music business. And you've over, especially over the last bunch of years, you've had lots of guest stars, other notable guitar players who you've played with, who you've had on your albums. So what do you think of kind of guys like, I'm just going to rattle off a bunch of names. Feel free to talk about any of them. Joe Bonamassa, Eric Gales, Derek Trucks, Philip Sacey, Warren Haynes, John Mayer, Kenny Wayne Shepherd, Gary Clark Jr., Samantha Fish, Marcus King, Kingfish. I mean, there's all these kind of great younger, and some of them aren't, they've been around for a while, but there's a lot of really great talent on the blues and blues rock scene right now. What are your opinions of some of these folks? I know you know a lot of them and you played with a lot of them. So who do you think are some of the
Played
ones
with
to really
all
watch?
I've played with all the ones you just mentioned there, and I have to say, you just mentioned the cream of the crop. You know, I think the beautiful thing is there is an entire group of young players out there coming up through the ranks who want to be blues rock or blues guitar players. And I think in another 10 years, when a lot of the guys you mentioned, when we've kind of faded out, there's going to be this whole new group of great players. It's every town I would go in on a tour, somebody'd come up and go, "Oh, have you heard this kid from this town? He's 14 and he's this amazing player, you know." And I think what has happened is there's been a backlash against, how can I put this? Up until 15, 20, 25 years ago, radio stations, especially FM, could play whatever they wanted. Then they were taken over by large conglomerate corporations. And that's when guys like me stopped getting airplay, you know. I'm trying to be, I'm trying not to name names here of corporations. I don't want them to get mad at me. You know, that's when a lot of crap started being forced down kids' throats, corporately produced, soulless crap. And that happened for a while. And this young group of musicians that are coming up now, I think it's a backlash. They were hearing all this crap on mainstream radio that just has no substance to it. And then they would hear something which was a human being with a musical instrument trying to play and sing and write from their heart about problems or about emotions or about our common humanity, something we can all relate to, something we can all feel. And they were drawn to that like a moth to a flame. And there really is a huge group of young, brilliant musicians coming up through the ranks right now that are not known, but they're going to be. And all those guitar players you mentioned, they're all incredible, and they're all, every one of them is a friend of mine. And I'm happy to know them all. And I think they are the group that also is inspiring this young group coming up, you know, and the late great people like Stevie Ray Vaughan, people like B.B. King, people who are no longer with us, but their music is still there. Eddie Van Halen, you know, talk about inspiring young musicians. How about that guy, you know?
Mhm.
And it's not just blues, you know. He did stuff with a guitar that nobody had ever done, you know. So I think this music is in great hands. And once again, I use this word, I'm optimistic about the future of it. I think it's going to live on, and I think it's going to thrive.
No, it has to, and it will. I mean, I think that history kind of shows that. And I think, all the guys we were just talking about, I think 10, 20 years from now, I think all these younger folks that you're mentioning here who are just coming up through the ranks, they're going to be looking at the Bonamasas and the Trouts and the Trucks and Haynes as the Clapton, Beck, Gibbons, Page, Van Halen's of today, right? Those are the
Yeah,
legends. They're not, maybe not quite legends yet, but they will be. They will be looked at that way in the
yeah,
very future. So
yeah. I think so too. You
yeah,
know, and I have my whole solo career. I have enjoyed trying to help young musicians. If I hear a young musician who I think has a extraordinary talent, I'm the first one to say, "Hey, come on up, get up and play with my band." And a lot of them, I've kind of sponsored them and helped them get record deals and played on their records. You know, I enjoy that. I enjoy trying to nurture this young group of musicians out there and give them a hand if I can.
yeah. So 2020, obviously, we already talked about the fact that no live work happening right now. Have you, I know this just came out, but are you already kind of planting the seeds for a follow-up? I mean, you've been pretty busy anyway over the years, almost releasing an album a year. So you got some ideas cooking for the follow-up?
Well, it's funny. As I said, I'm sitting here. I'm in Denmark. I'm in our house. We have a house here in Denmark because my wife is a Danish citizen. And we're right on the edge of a national park. So if you walk out our back door, you're in gigantic sand dunes, and you cross the dunes and you're at the North Sea. And we're very far away from the virus, which is a good thing. But we are out here sequestered. So I have been, as I said, playing this thing consistently and sitting here and writing songs. So I'm actually starting to write another album, and I've even run it by my label and said, "Hey, I think I'm getting ready to I'm starting to feel like going back into a studio." I'm a little nervous about going into the studio until the pandemic slows down or until there's a vaccine, because I do want to record at Robbie's place, and that's back in California. And I don't feel safe there because I have to say that when you have a transplant, you have to take drugs for the rest of your life that turn off your immune system.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very susceptible to infections and colds and stuff, right? So until it's more safe for me to be back home, I'm going to be kind of just biding my time out here in the sand dunes and enjoying my life, enjoying my time with my wife, writing songs. We go out and we're in the national park, so we go out and walk through forests and over hills and down beaches, and we're having a good time. But we are just marking time. We're in limbo until I can get back to work. But
Right.
it's a verbose answer to your question, which
Well, better
is
play it
the
safe.
answer is, yeah, I'm writing songs, and I've already discussed with Provogue Records doing another record soon.
Cool. Cool. Well, we'll look forward to it. And yeah, I play it safe. I mean, that's what I tell everybody. It's like, if you've got any kind of pre-existing conditions, stay away from planes and all that kind of stuff. And the music will come. And it sounds like you're already getting it ready. So when the time is right, we'll have another album. And that's great. Pretty cool though, when you think about it. I mean, this just came out not long ago. We got Bonamassa's album coming out like in a week. So pretty good year, this for blues music, despite everything that's going on. So
Yeah, but
also,
a really kind of weird thing is some of my friends had records finished, and then they were saying, well, since I can't tour, I'm not going to put the record out until I can tour.
Yeah.
And I thought about that too. And my wife, who manages my band, we had discussions, and then we discussed with the label that people are sitting at home, a lot of them with nothing to do, and they're chomping at the bit to hear some new music, something new. And of course, when I can go out and tour, I'll come out and play these songs, but I can't do it now. But these friends of mine, one of them still is holding back her record. And it's kind of like, well, then when you can go out and tour, 500 people are going to put out records all at the same week because, okay, now we can tour again, And so I don't believe in that. I know Joe's putting out a record. I think it's great to put out some music now. People need it. They want it,
Yeah. Yeah. And talking with a lot of bands and musicians this year, it's been like this catch-22. Well, do I put it out because I can't really go out and play live and promote it? But at the same token, everybody's sitting at home and everybody wants new music. So yeah, there's been, I would say, the first half of the year, not a lot of new releases coming out. They're starting to come out a little more fast and furious now, but yeah, because we don't know, is 2021 going to be exactly like this? So how long are you going to hold on to this record for 2 years?
Yeah,
might as well get it out and get it in people's hands, make some money off of it at least. I know there's not a ton of money to be made in releasing albums anymore, but still, I think it's important. So,
well, along with that is you keep yourself in the public recognition and knowledge. You don't just disappear. You go, well, hey, here I am. I'm still making music, and here it is. I'm not just disappearing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll see how everything turns out. I was reading yesterday about the cruise that you're going to be doing, the Rock Legends cruise in 2022. I know that's a long way off, but I saw the lineup and I was like, oh man, it's a great fit for you. It's like cool mix of like classic rock and blues rock. Looks great. So I know you're probably looking forward to that. I know it's a ways off, but
well, I am. And originally that was scheduled for February of 2021.
Yeah, not going to happen.
And there's no way that was going to happen. And even if it was going to happen, I was not going to get on a cruise ship that early. So I posted that lineup, and a couple people went, well, why is it 2022? And it's because who knows how long this is going to last. I got to be honest, when I came home on the 11th or the 12th of March from that tour, I expected that in 3 or 4 months I'd be back touring. I had no idea it was going to go this long, you know.
Yeah. Crazy. Well, let's hope for a brighter next year. That's all we can do. But in the meantime, everybody, please go out and check out Ordinary Madness, the latest release from Mr. Walter Trout. And I want to thank him so much for coming on the show today. This is a pleasure speaking to you, and hopefully we'll do it again at some point. And hopefully, being as we're both East Coast guys, hopefully sometime when you do get back on the road, I can come out and see you playing somewhere in the area. I would love to meet you in person. That would be fantastic.
Oh, that would be great, man. We can sit down, have a cup of coffee, you know, and hang out, man. Yeah, I feel, you know, I can tell the East Coast thing, man. That's where I'm from, Jersey, right?
Yep. Yep.
So I feel right at home talking to you, man.
There you go. Cool. Yeah, there's something about being from the East Coast that I don't think anybody else gets. I don't know what it is, but we're cool
Yeah.
people. We're not as uptight as everybody seems to think we are, right?
It's funny when I go back and play in Jersey and I play in New York and Philly and stuff, I feel right at home. I feel like, yeah, these are the guys I grew up with here, you know.
So in my neck of the woods, just so you know, like kind of so I've got Daryl's house not far from me. I've got the Town Crier not far from me. And these are places where a lot, you know, Eric Gales and all these guys, they all play at all these places. The Chance Theater in Poughkeepsie, New York. And then, you know, New York City's got all the clubs and venues there as well. So hopefully we'll get to, I'll come down to Jersey to see you. So whatever.
Yeah, I normally do Daryl's house every year, sometimes 2 times in a year. You know, I love playing there.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I look forward to it. And once again, everybody, check out the new album. Visit us here on the web at www.seatranquility.org. Check us out on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. I want to thank once again Mr. Walter Trout for giving us some great conversation today. And go check out the CD. It's really
Thanks a lot, Pete Pardo. I appreciate it, man. Thank you
Thanks,
so
Walter.
much.
Take care. And everybody, thanks for watching. For Walter Trout, I am Pete Pardo. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Take care, man. Bye-bye.